Amidst the relentless drumming of rain on Lexington Avenue, where the cracked sidewalk mirrored the fractured lives of those who tread upon it, stood a beacon of warmth and light, a small diner, its neon sign flickering like a distant lighthouse, guiding weary souls home. Inside, Serena Carter, with her chestnut brown skin glistening from the sweat of a long day's work, was about to close up shop. Yet her heart, unlike the cold, unyielding rain outside, was open, ever ready to embrace the forsaken. It was past 11, the hour when shadows stretch long and the city whispers secrets to those who listen. Serena, despite the exhaustion that tugged at her limbs, could not ignore the sight of a small, shivering figure just beyond her diner's glow. There, under the dim, flickering streetlight, a boy in a battered wheelchair, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, clutched a frayed blanket that offered little against the biting wind. Serena's heart ached at the sight. She didn't hesitate, didn't ponder the extra minutes she'd have to stay. She pushed open the diner door, the wind greeting her with a chill. Hey, sweetie," she called out softly, her voice a soothing balm in the harsh night. Crouching beside him, she asked, "What are you doing out here all alone?" The boy, startled at first, looked up with eyes as blue and wide as the sky on a clear day. "I'm waiting for my dad," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper over the storm's roar. Unknown to them both across the street, a billionaire watched his gaze piercing through the rain-soaked night. This simple act of kindness, this beacon of light in the storm, was about to unlock doors Serena could never have imagined. In a world where the rain seemed to wash away hope, Serena's compassion was a seed of change about to sprout in the most unexpected of places. Serena's gaze swept up and down the street, the emptiness echoing the hollow pit in her stomach. There was no one, just the lonely flicker of the Cash for Gold sign across the road, its neon glow casting ghostly shadows on the wet pavement. The only sound was the tires of passing cars, their whispers against the wet asphalt like secrets shared in the night. "Where is he?" she murmured, concern lacing her words like threads of worry. The boy beside her, small and fragile, shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter around his trembling frame. Serena exhaled, her breath misting in the chill air, and bit her lip. How many nights had she seen this scene? Too many. Too many children left in the cold, waiting for someone who would never arrive. "You can't stay out here, not in this mess," she said, her voice a warm embrace in the cold. She offered him a smile, one that promised safety and warmth. "Come inside with me, okay? It's warm, and I've got something special for you." The boy hesitated, his eyes darting between Serena and the street. Then, with a slow nod, he agreed. Serena gently took the handles of his wheelchair, guiding him inside. The diner enveloped them in its comforting warmth, the aroma of buttered toast and burnt coffee wrapping around them like a protective cloak. She led him to a booth near the radiator, draping a fresh towel over his shoulders. Crouching to meet his gaze, she introduced herself. "I'm Serena." Her grin was another ray of hope. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The boy sniffed, his fingers curling around the blanket's edge. "Daniel," he whispered. "That's a strong name," Serena approved with a nod. "Are you hungry?" He nodded hesitantly. Without waiting for more, Serena was on her feet, moving towards the kitchen with a purpose. She returned soon after, setting down a plate of golden, crisp grilled cheese, its melted heart oozing out alongside a bowl of tomato soup. This was her comfort meal, the one her grandmother made when the world felt too cruel, the nights too long. "This one's on me," she said, tucking a napkin into his lap, her eyes meeting his with a silent promise of care. Daniel's eyes widened, the steam from the soup warming his cheeks. As Daniel took his first bite, his eyes widened in delight, the cheese stretching into long, gooey strings. "This is the best thing I've ever had," he murmured, his voice tinged with an almost reverent awe. Serena chuckled, watching him devour the sandwich with an innocent hunger. "Good food does wonders, doesn't it?" she said with a light tone, but her heart ached. There was something about seeing a child so young, already shouldering the burdens of life, that struck a chord deep within her. Unbeknownst to her, eyes were watching from across the street. A sleek, black Bentley cloaked in the shadows, its windows tinted to reflect the diner's neon glow. Inside, Raymond Holt sat in silence, his sharp gray eyes fixed on the scene before him. At 46, Raymond had sculpted an empire out of control, precision, and ruthlessness. Holt Dynamics was the pulsating heart of Baltimore's tech scene, a billion-dollar behemoth that thrived on efficiency, not sentiment. Raymond, its CEO, had spent years ensuring that nothing, neither person, emotion, nor weakness could disrupt the machine's relentless march forward. Yet here he was, watching, listening, pondering. Daniel was his son, and the woman, a black waitress in a worn apron, was feeding him for free in this rundown diner. Raymond's jaw clenched. He had been delayed on an urgent call with his investors in Japan and had instructed Daniel to wait just a few minutes by the diner. He hadn't anticipated this. With a swift motion, he reached for his phone, dialing quickly. "Nora," he said sharply when his assistant answered, "get down to Lexington Diner. No suits, no heels. I need you there in 20 minutes. There was a brief pause. "Sir," Nora's voice came through. Raymond's grip on the phone tightened further. "Find out everything you can about the woman who just fed my son." Then he hung up, his mind racing with possibilities and implications. Inside the cozy diner, Daniel's laughter broke through the night for the first time. His legs swung freely under the table, soup stains adorning his chin like badges of honor. Serena, with a gentle shake of her head, wiped the mess away with a napkin. "Messy eater, huh?" She teased, her eyes twinkling with warmth. Across the street, Raymond observed his face, a mask of inscrutability. His mind, a labyrinth of calculations, didn't believe in acts of kindness without strings attached. Serena Carter, unbeknownst to her, had just incurred a debt in his ledger of favors. Serena, wiping her hands on her apron, glanced through the diner window, where raindrops raced down the glass in erratic paths. Daniel, now warmed, no longer trembled as he savored the last bite of his sandwich. His face, once marked by the weariness of life's burdens, had softened, shedding the guarded look that no child should know. This small act of kindness filled Serena with a quiet joy. One more person touched by compassion, she thought, one more moment of light in the dimness of daily struggles. Then the door burst open, ushering in a rush of cold air. A woman entered, her attire, casual jeans and a hoodie, her blonde hair hidden beneath a faded cap. She was an anomaly here, not for her clothes, but for the sharpness in her gaze, the way she assessed the room with one sweeping look. Serena, seasoned in the ways of diners, recognized someone not here for mere refreshment. The woman's eyes locked onto Daniel, her demeanor softening as she crouched beside him. "Hey, champ, time to go," she said, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. Daniel, his frown deepening, wiped his mouth with Serena's napkin. "But I haven't finished my milk," he protested. The woman, whom Serena would soon learn was named Nora, tilted her head with a smile that seemed too polished. "You can take—" Serena's instincts flared like wildfire through a dry forest. She had witnessed too many people dismissed, erased, shuffled off without a second glance. Too many moments where someone like her wasn't expected to question, but she always did. With arms folded, she scrutinized the woman before her. "You know him?" she asked, her voice a blade cutting through the tension. The woman's smile remained, yet her posture betrayed her, a slight stiffening of the shoulders, the briefest flicker of hesitation. "Yeah," she replied with a smoothness that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm his aunt." Serena didn't blink, her gaze shifting to Daniel. "That true sweetheart," she pressed gently. Daniel's hesitation was a heartbeat too long, a telltale sign that made Nora's jaw clench. Serena had grown up in a world where hesitation could spell disaster. She knew the look of fear, the silent power that could crush lives. And she knew with the certainty of the sun rising that this woman was no aunt to Daniel. Crouching beside him, Serena met his uncertain eyes with a softness that felt like armor. "You good baby," she whispered, her voice a shield against the world. "You want to go with her?" Daniel's gaze darted between them, his fingers gripping the napkin until his knuckles turned ghostly white. "She's here for my dad." He mumbled, the weight of the world in his young voice. "I guess I have to." Every fiber of Serena's being screamed at her to push further, to demand more, to ensure this child's safety. Yet she was no stranger to the consequences of a black woman pressing too hard, asking too many questions, drawing the wrong kind of attention. Still, she couldn't let him leave empty-handed. With a purposeful stride, she walked to the counter, grabbed a chocolate chip cookie wrapped in wax paper, and pressed it into Daniel's small hand. "For the road," she said, her voice a mixture of warmth and sorrow. His tiny fingers curled around the cookie, and for the first time that night, a grin broke through his worry. "Thanks, Serena. You're the best." Serena managed a smile, but a tightness gripped her chest as she watched Nora wheel Daniel towards the door. What kind of world do we live in, where a child's safety must be weighed against the risk of asking too many questions? The silence between them was palpable, a quiet tension so thick it could be sliced with a knife. Just as Nora was about to step out into the relentless rain, she paused and glanced back. No words were exchanged, but her look spoke volumes, a silent warning. Across the street, the Bentley's headlights flickered as Nora approached. The rear door swung open before she could even raise her hand to knock, and Raymond emerged, his imposing figure illuminated by the neon sign of the diner. Once Daniel was securely buckled in the back seat, Raymond turned to Nora. Her hood slid back as she exhaled, her voice tinged with a mix of admiration and caution. "She's sharp," she admitted. "She didn't buy the ant story, almost called me out on it." Raymond's face remained an unreadable mask, yet Nora continued. "She let him go because she didn't have a choice. You know how it is. A black woman making a scene would only end up in trouble, not me." Raymond's jaw twitched, a slight acknowledgement of the truth in her words, but he offered no comment. Nora crossed her arms, her stance firm. "She's not like the others," she declared, and Raymond knew this already. He had seen it the moment Serena stepped into the rain without hesitation, the way she spoke to Daniel, as if he mattered not as an inconvenience. He had witnessed people bending, flattering, manipulating for his money, but Serena hadn't even known it was his son she was helping. That made her dangerous. Raymond opened the car door, sliding inside. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "I want everything on her name, address, background." He fastened his seatbelt, his gaze fixed straight ahead. "I want it on my desk by morning." Nora hesitated, her pause a beat too long. "Sir, by morning," she exhaled, then nodded. "Understood." As the Bentley pulled away, the diner receded in the rearview mirror, but Raymond's mind was not on the city lights or the traffic ahead. Instead, it lingered on Serena, her actions, and what they might mean. What drives a person to help without knowing the stakes? What kind of person doesn't seek gain from kindness? These questions, like the rain, continued to fall unanswered as they drove into the night. As Serena Carter trudged through the relentless rain, her sneakers squelched with each step, sending shivers deep into her bones. The diner's meager tips jingled in her pocket, a pitiful sound against the backdrop of her financial woes. Yet the echo of Daniel's grin lingered, unsettling her. What was it about that encounter that gnawed at her, burrowing under her skin like a persistent itch? She had seen that look before, that veneer of politeness, the slight hesitation in Daniel's response. This was no ordinary pickup. This was calculated, deliberate. She ascended the creaky stairs to her modest one-bedroom on West Fayette Street, where the heat was as unreliable as the promises of politicians and the walls whispered secrets of her neighbors' lives. The moment the door clicked shut, she slumped against it, her hand wearily dragging down her face. Serena had long ago mastered the art of minding her own business, but this felt different. This felt wrong. Before she could fully process the unease, a sharp knock shattered the silence of her apartment. Serena's body tensed. Visitors at this hour were as rare as a sunny day in February. Peering through the peephole, her heart skipped a beat. There stood a man, his stature imposing, wrapped in an expensive black coat that screamed wealth, his gray eyes piercing, dissecting her existence even before she acknowledged him. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice a mixture of caution and curiosity. A brief pause, then a voice deep measured, almost too controlled, responded. "Raymond Holt." The name meant nothing to Serena. "What do you want?" she asked, her hand firm on the lock, her mind racing with questions. What could this stranger possibly want with her? Why now? The night deepened, the mystery thickened, and Serena knew whatever it was, it would not be easily dismissed. Serena's gut screamed an emphatic, "Hell no," at the thought of opening the door, yet the tendrils of curiosity wrapped around her, pulling the latch open just enough to glimpse his face. He stood out starkly against the backdrop of her modest apartment, a man who clearly belonged to another world, a world of influence, of power, the kind that could shatter lives with a mere whisper. "I don't know you," Serena stated, her voice flat, devoid of the storm brewing inside her. His expression remained unchanged, as if carved from stone. "No, but you know my son." Her pulse leapt, skipping like a stone across water. She scrutinized him now, the way his formidable presence dominated the tiny doorway. The droplets of rain still clinging to his coat, his shoes pristine, as if untouched by the grime of the city. This was a man of means, the kind whose power was silent yet overwhelming. "Daniel," she said, her voice a cautious whisper. "You're his father." His acknowledgement was a mere nod, barely a ripple on the surface of his composed demeanor. "I was across the street last night." He revealed his words, chilling her more than the damp air seeping into her apartment. "You were watching." Serena exhaled sharply, her breath a visible mist in the cold air. "I was," he confirmed, his gaze flickering with something unreadable. "I'm here because I don't believe in charity, Serena, but I do believe in paying debts." Without awaiting her response, he produced an envelope from within his coat, placing it on her weathered kitchen table with a finality that echoed in the room. Serena remained rooted to the spot, her eyes drawn to the envelope. It was thick, exuding an air of importance, the kind of paper that spoke of significance of weighty matters. "What is that?" She managed her voice barely above a whisper. "A job offer," he replied, his tone as if explaining something obvious to a child. Serena's mind stalled, her thoughts a whirlwind. "Oh, what?" She blinked, incredulity painting her features. Raymond tilted his head slightly, a gesture of patience, or perhaps a challenge. "A job at HT Dynamics. 6 figures, benefits, the works." Serena let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, her voice slicing through the tension. "You think I want to work for some rich man who believes handing out a job is enough to erase his debts?" Raymond didn't even blink when Serena suggested writing him a check. "I don't think you want charity, Serena," he said with a voice that carried the weight of certainty, "and that's why I'm not offering it." The mere mention of her name from his lips sent a shiver down her spine, a tightening in her chest as if something vital was being squeezed. Arms crossed, she retorted, "You don't even know me." His response was unwavering, the calm before a storm. "I know enough. I know you fed my son without expecting anything in return. I know you didn't treat him like an inconvenience. That's rare, Serena." His words were like pebbles thrown into the still waters of her heart, creating ripples of emotion she couldn't ignore. Serena's gaze dropped to the envelope, its absurd heft mocking her from the table. "And what exactly would I be doing at H Dynamics making coffee?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. A flicker of amusement danced across Raymond's face before it vanished into the seriousness of his intent. "No, you'd be working directly with me, handling negotiations, public relations. You're good with people. I need someone like that." Serena let out a dismissive snort. "You don't need me. You've got a company full of Ivy League graduates who'd slit each other's throats for a job like that." His expression shifted subtly, a crack in his otherwise unyielding facade. "That's exactly why I don't trust them," he replied, letting the silence that followed stretch like a taut wire, heavy with the implications of his offer. The weight of his proposal pressed against her, wrapping around her pride, her exhaustion, her stubborn refusal to be bought. 6 figures. 6 figures meant no more late rent, no more living from paycheck to paycheck, no more nights of wondering how to make her last $20 stretch. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Never owe these people anything, baby. You know they don't give without taking." Her jaw set, she looked him squarely in the eye. "Why me?" Raymond's gaze held hers, and for the first time, something in his eyes flickered a spark of genuine curiosity. "Because you saw my son as a human being, not a charity case," he said, his voice softening, inviting her into a world where her value was recognized, not just her need. "Son," he said, his voice now a mere whisper, as if the words cost him dearly. "Not my money, not my name." Serena's throat constricted as she glanced at the envelope one last time. Her fingers, trembling slightly, reached out and lifted it. "I'll think about it," she murmured, her voice barely above a breath. Raymond's gaze lingered on her for a heartbeat longer. Then he gave a sharp nod. "Good." Without another word, he turned and left the echo of his departure reverberating through the room. Serena remained standing, the door's click still ringing in her ears, the envelope now a tangible burden in her grasp. She knew deep down that she wasn't merely contemplating. She was already committed to saying yes. The first day at Hall Dynamics was like entering a realm where the mundane was transformed into the extraordinary. Here the air was thick with the scent of wealth, where every surface gleamed with the polish of success and power, hung in the atmosphere like a heavy invisible fog. Serena, dressed in a department store blazer and heels she'd thrifted, felt the weight of countless eyes upon her the moment she stepped into the lobby of the towering glass edifice. It was not the familiar gaze of curiosity. It was the cold, calculating scrutiny of evaluation. She held her head high, her shoulders squared. She had navigated environments where she was underestimated before. She knew how to stand her ground. Raymond awaited in his office, a vast modern expanse with panoramic windows that framed the city's skyline. His desk was so pristine, it seemed more an exhibit than a tool of work. He didn't acknowledge her entry, merely gestured to the chair opposite him. "You're late," he stated, his voice devoid of warmth. Serena raised an eyebrow as she took her seat. "By 2 minutes," she countered, her tone firm. Raymond's gray eyes, sharp and unyielding, finally met hers. "That's 2 minutes I don't get back," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. Serena exhaled, shaking her head. Here she was, barely 5 seconds into her new life, and already she felt the tension of a challenge. What had she gotten herself into? Already the air was charged with tension, the question hanging between them like a challenge: did she want to be here or not? Serena leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing as she studied Raymond, his expression giving nothing away. "That remains to be seen," she said, her voice a mix of defiance and curiosity. Before she could throw another retort into the fray, the glass door swung open and Nora glided in, tablet in hand, her face a mask of unreadable calm. Serena didn't miss the swift assessment in Nora's gaze as it swept over her, as if deciding whether she fit into this world of high stakes and sharp suits. Spoiler alert, Serena had already made up her mind about her place here. "Miss Carter." Nora's voice was smooth, almost too smooth. "Welcome to Holt Dynamics." Serena met her gaze head-on, a slow, deliberate smile curling her lips. "Oh, we're doing last names now. Good to see you again, Ms. Winters." A flicker, just a whisper of something in Nora's eyes before she turned her attention back to Raymond. "I've prepared the reports for the upcoming negotiations with the Orion Group," she announced, handing him the tablet without so much as a second glance at Serena. "Would you like me to brief her on company protocols?" Raymond's response was swift, devoid of any warmth. "No, I will." Serena wasn't sure if that was a promise of protection or a prelude to battle. Nora merely nodded, but at the door she hesitated, her gaze lingering on Serena. "Good luck," she murmured, the words dripping with an undercurrent of warning rather than encouragement. Serena tilted her head, pondering the hidden message, but there was no time for contemplation. Raymond was already diving into work, no room for small talk, no gentle settling in. He slid a file across the table, his voice flat. "Orion Group, they want to push through a contract that would cut labor costs by outsourcing jobs overseas. That means layoffs, thousands." Her stomach churned as she skimmed the file. "And you want me to?" She ventured, her voice trailing off, already knowing the answer. Raymond's gaze didn't waver, his eyes like steel. "I want you to do what you do best." Serena leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, her eyes narrowing with a mix of intrigue and skepticism. "So let me get this straight," she began, her voice edged with a playful challenge. "You brought me here because you believe I can. What charmed my way into coaxing these billionaires into suddenly growing a conscience?" Raymond remained unfazed, his gaze steady. "No," he replied, his tone firm, yet tinged with an underlying fervor. "I brought you in because I believe you grasp something they do not." "And what might that be?" Serena pressed, her curiosity piqued by his enigmatic demeanor. He leaned forward, his voice lowering as if to share a profound secret. "Those who have nothing to lose are the ones who fight the hardest." The words struck a chord within her, resonating with the truth she felt but seldom acknowledged. She stared at him, the weight of his words sinking in before exhaling deeply, shaking her head with a mix of frustration and admiration. "You know, for someone who runs a tech empire, you talk in riddles an awful lot." For a fleeting moment, the corner of his mouth twitched, almost forming a smile, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Meeting's at noon," he stated, standing up, the air of command returning. "Try not to be late." Serena rolled her eyes but held back her retort. She had a mission after all. As they entered the conference room, the temperature seemed to drop, the stark steel and glass design intended perhaps to unsettle. She took her seat beside Raymond at the imposing mahogany table, facing 3 men in tailored suits, each exuding the kind of confidence that whispered of their power to shape destinies with a mere signature. Philip Langford, the eldest, with his white hair slicked back, wore arrogance like a second skin, barely acknowledging her presence. Serena, however, was no stranger to such men, those who only valued those who mirrored their own image. She kept her composure, her resolve unshaken. Raymond initiated the dialogue, his voice cutting through the cold air. "You propose moving production to Taiwan, claiming it will save costs, increase efficiency," he said, pausing for effect. "I say it'll..." As Langford's thin-lipped smile crept across his face, A smile that never reached the icy depths of his eyes, he spoke with a chilling clarity. You misunderstand, Raymond. It's not personal, it's merely business. Beneath the table, Serena's fingers curled into tight fists. Not personal. How many times had she heard those cold, dismissive words? They echoed through her life like a haunting refrain. When her landlord had abruptly raised the rent to cater to the whims of developers eager to breathe new life into the neighborhood, when her mother's job at the textile plant vanished overnight due to the allure of cheaper overseas labor, and now when companies like this one tore through communities like a storm, all in the name of strategy, her smile was laced with defiance as she tilted her head. Funny, isn't it? It's always just business until it's your livelihood on the chopping block. Langford's gaze flicked to her, for the first time his attention momentarily captured by the steel in her voice. Raymond Silent observed the unfolding drama with a quiet intensity. Langford exhaled sharply through his nose, as if to say he had better things to do than entertain the concerns of the workforce. And you are? He asked, his tone dismissive. Serena didn't flinch. Serena Carter, Holt Dynamics, she replied, her voice steady. Langford's eyes scanned her briefly, and in that fleeting glance, Serena saw the moment he underestimated her. But she was no stranger to being underestimated. He leaned back, waving a dismissive hand. Look, sweetheart, I get it. You think we're the villains here. But this is about numbers, about what makes the most sense. Sweetheart, Serena's jaw set in a hard line. She leaned forward, mirroring his posture, her voice cool and resolute. All right, she said, let's talk numbers. Sliding a document across the table, she continued. This is a breakdown of what happens when you offshore production. Sure, you save costs initially, but in 3 years, when labor demands rise, your new manufacturing hub will become a financial sinkhole. You'll spend millions on restructuring, rehiring, and weathering PR nightmares when headlines scream about American workers betrayed for profit. Her finger tapped the paper emphatically. This was not just business. This was the heartbeat of communities, the future of families, the essence of loyalty. As Langford cast a fleeting glance at the file, his fingers hovering above it, Serena locked eyes with him. Her gaze was unwavering, a silent challenge that pierced through the room's tension. You can make the smart choice now, she said, her voice as calm and deadly as the quiet before a storm. Or you can explain to your investors why your short-term gains just cost them their long-term returns. The silence that followed was palpable, thick with the weight of Serena's words. Finally, Langford exhaled a sound of reluctant concession and picked up the paper. He scanned it with a furrowed brow. Raymond didn't smile, but Serena could sense the atmosphere shifting. She had just turned the tables. Langford, his face an unreadable mask, set the document down. We'll revisit the proposal, he conceded. Raymond gave a nod, firm and decisive. See that you do. The meeting dissolved soon after, with Langford and his associates exiting the room. Serena felt Raymond's gaze heavy with expectation upon her. Turning to him, she met his eyes, which were filled with a mix of admiration and scrutiny. After a long, thoughtful pause, Raymond spoke. I knew I hired you for a reason. Serena's smirk was triumphant. Damn right you did. And in that moment, for the first time since she had stepped into Holt Dynamics, she felt a profound sense of belonging. 2 months in, Serena believed she had found her rhythm at Holt Dynamics. She had learned to navigate the corridors of power, to hold her own in a world that often overlooked her. She had faced down Philip Langford and emerged victorious. She had proven to Raymond and to herself that she was not merely a token hire, a corporate experiment. She belonged here. But victories at the zenith are fleeting, as Serena soon discovered. Now the company was teetering on the edge, and she was in the thick of the storm. Someone had orchestrated her downfall, setting her up to take the blame. Just back from a client meeting, she was intercepted by Nora in the hallway. We have a problem, Nora said, her tone slicing through the air, sharp and urgent. Serena's brow furrowed. Define problem, she demanded, her mind racing with possibilities, her heart pounding with the sudden shift in her secure world. Serena's heart plummeted as Nora silently passed her a printed email. The very sight of it made Serena's stomach churn with dread. There it was in black and white, a confidential company report filled with sensitive financial data, now leaked to the press. And there glaringly was Serena's name attached to the email, forwarding this breach. The room seemed to contract, the air growing thick and oppressive. Serena forced a breath, her mind racing. "This isn't mine," she whispered, her voice barely a thread. "I know," Nora replied, her tone grave, "but someone wants it to be." Serena's pulse thundered in her ears. She knew too well the speed at which such accusations could spiral out of control, especially for a black woman in a predominantly white corporate arena. There was no presumption of innocence here. The moment suspicion was cast, she was deemed guilty. Clutching the paper, she scanned it again, her eyes flicking back and forth. "Who else has seen this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Raymond and the board," Nora answered. The words hit Serena like a physical blow. Her breath caught. She had fought tooth and nail to secure her place in this company, and now they were poised to tear it away from her. Raymond's office felt colder than usual, or perhaps it was just the chill of his gaze. His hands were folded on the desk, his expression unreadable, yet his sharp gray eyes dissected her, measured her worth. A tightness gripped Serena's chest. "Tell me I wasn't wrong," he said, his voice low, controlled. With a sudden, forceful motion, Serena slammed the email onto his desk. "This isn't me," she exclaimed, the words almost a plea. Raymond didn't even glance at the paper. He didn't need to. "I want to believe that," he said, his voice unwavering. "But this is a serious leak, Serena. Millions in exposure, stock drops, investigations. Do you understand how severe this is?" Serena leaned forward, her hands planted firmly on his desk, her eyes locked with his. "I understand perfectly," she said, her voice firm, her resolve unwavering. "I also understand that whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. I was the easy target, right?" In the heart of this corporate colossus, Serena stood like an outsider, the audacious black woman with an excess of confidence that bordered on defiance. Who would ever take her word over the seasoned executive who had spent a decade within these walls? Raymond didn't flinch. His silence was a heavy cloak that wrapped around them both. Serena's nails bit into her palms, her voice a whisper of desperation. "Do you think I did this?" Raymond's gaze didn't waver, his response a soothing balm. "No." Serena exhaled the tension in her chest, easing, but he wasn't finished. "The board does," he added, his voice low, heavy, with unspoken implications. Serena swore softly, her steps pacing the room, each stride a testament to the noose tightening around her neck. "So what happens now?" She forced out her words, laced with the weight of her predicament. Raymond exhaled, a hand rubbing over his jaw, his expression contemplative. "We find the real leak," he declared, his tone resolute. Serena paused, struck by his use of "we." For the first time since she entered, the icy grip around her heart loosened. Raymond stood, slipping his suit jacket back on a signal of his readiness to fight. "Nora is already tracing the email's origin, but it was routed through an external server. Someone covered their tracks well." His eyes met hers, a silent pact forming between them. "We'll have to be smarter." Serena crossed her arms, her stance defiant. "And what if we don't find them in time? What if the board decides to throw me to the wolves?" Raymond's jaw tightened, a flicker of determination in his eyes. "Then we make them regret it." There was a promise in his words, and for the first time, Serena believed him. The battle lines were drawn, and whoever had orchestrated this frame-up would soon understand the ferocity of the storm they had unleashed. The truth, like a rapidly unraveling thread, would expose them. Serena and Nora worked tirelessly through the night, sifting through server logs, chasing digital footprints. The perpetrator had been meticulous, but not meticulous enough. The leak was traced to a secondary account, one linked to none other than Eric Calloway, a senior executive with a decade at Hall Dynamics, his tenure now casting a shadow over his integrity. With her reputation untarnished, Serena strode into the boardroom before they could drag her in like a common thief. The atmosphere was charged with tension, the air almost crackling as dozens of polished, powerful men in their impeccably tailored suits glared at her, their eyes sharp as if she had already been convicted. Raymond, the epitome of composure, sat at the head of the table, his expression inscrutable. A board member, an older man with a smirk as thin as a razor's edge, gestured to an empty seat. "Miss Carter, I assume you know why you're here." Serena, standing firm, had no intention of sitting. "I do," she replied, her voice unwavering. "And I assume you all know you're about to make a very costly error." A fleeting spark of amusement danced in Raymond's eyes, but he remained silent, a silent sentinel watching the unfolding drama. The board member began again, "Miss Carter," but Serena cut him off, her steps measured as she paced. I was an easy target, wasn't I? The new hire, the outsider, the one you thought you could blame and conveniently forget. She halted, placing a hefty folder on the table with a thud. Except you've chosen the wrong person. She slid the folder towards them. A heavy silence filled the room as they rifled through the documents, their expressions morphing from disdain to a dawning realization of alarm. Eric Calloway, 2 seats down, watched his face drain of color by the second. These are traced emails. Serena continued, her voice now laced with a quiet intensity. Bank transfers, call logs with reporters all linked to Calloway, not me. She crossed her arms defiantly. And before you even think to ask, yes, our legal team already has copies, and so does the press. So if you're looking to talk about damage control, I suggest you start there. A murmur rippled through the room like a wave. Calloway leaped to his feet, his voice a desperate, sharp edge cutting through the tension. This is absurd, she's bluffing. Serena turned her gaze, piercing her stance unyielding. The room held its breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game of corporate chess. Raymond arched a brow, his voice slicing through the tension like a shard of cut glass. Am I? He finally spoke, his words landing with the force of a hammer. No, she's not, he declared, the statement hitting like a physical blow. Calloway's mouth snapped shut, his jaw clenching in silence. Raymond adjusted his cufflinks with deliberate precision. Effective immediately, Eric Calloway is terminated. Full legal action will be pursued. He allowed the gravity of his words to sink in, then turned to the room with an icy gaze. Let this serve as a warning to anyone else in this company thinking they can play the same game. The silence that followed was deafening, a stark testament to his authority. Serena, standing beside him, didn't need to smile. Her victory was palpable, resonating through the air. 2 weeks later, at Daniel's graduation, Serena stood with Raymond watching as the boy beamed up at her from his wheelchair diploma in hand like a trophy. I told you I'd make it, he exclaimed, his chest swelling with pride. Serena laughed, tousling his hair. Never doubted it for a second, she replied, her voice warm with genuine affection. Raymond, usually the epitome of cool detachment, softened visibly. You did good, Carter. He acknowledged, his tone unexpectedly gentle. She smirked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Damn right I did. Daniel, glancing between them, couldn't help but ask, Are you guys going to hug or something? Raymond sighed, Absolutely not. Serena rolled her eyes. God, no. Yet Daniel's grin widened, sensing the unspoken bond. For the first time in years, Serena felt the weight of something real, something that mattered, and she knew her journey was far from over. Years later, Serena Carter sat in the executive office of Holt Dynamics, her name now etched on the door as Vice President of Corporate Strategy. What began as a mere job, a challenge, had evolved into a mission. Under her stewardship, the company not only expanded its ethical labor initiatives, but also launched mentorship programs and forged partnerships with minority-owned businesses. Across town, a new community center bore the name Carter Holt Foundation, dedicated to funding education and job opportunities for underserved youth. What had she built? Something lasting, something with a heartbeat. As the ribbon unfurled and the ceremony began, there stood Daniel, now a college freshman, beside her. His grin was as wide as when he was a little boy who once received a free meal in a diner simply because of kindness. Oh, how these acts of generosity always yield the richest dividends. Share in our journey of meaningful narratives by pressing the like and subscribe buttons. Don't miss out. Turn on that notification bell to awaken each day with profound insights and deep compassion. Thank you, dear viewers, for joining us on this voyage of the heart. Your comments, likes, shares, and subscriptions mean the world to us. Let's keep this beautiful connection alive.